Hello, grade 9s. We're going to get started on our lesson for order of operations with exponents. But before we do, let's do a quick warm-up. So our warm-up today involves power of 0. It says evaluate the following expressions without using a calculator. So in order to do this, we need to recognize that if you raise something to the power of 0, it equals 1. And this is true for most cases, but sometimes we have to pay attention to what happens if there is a negative sign. So a single digit without a positive or negative sign to the power of 0 always equals 1. So in this case, 5 to the power of 0 equals 1. Negative 5 to the power of 0, since the negative 5 is in brackets, the negative is included with the 5, so it's like taking something and putting it to the power of 0, so this one's also going to be 1. This one, we already did negative 5 to the power of 0 and we got 1, but now we have this negative hanging out front, so it's going to be negative 1. Negative 5 to the power of 0 without brackets, same idea. The negative hangs out front, and then 5 to the power of 0 is 1. And this last one is a very interesting case because we have brackets around the negative 5 to the 0. So remember, with order of operations, we have to use we have to do brackets first. That means that first let's calculate inside the brackets, negative 5 to the power of 0. So if we can ignore the brackets for a second, we'll see that negative 5 to the power of 0, we already figured out right here in the question before, and that was negative 1. So negative 5 to the power of 0 with the brackets around that is again going to be negative 1. Now we're subtracting a negative number, and remember in this case, two negatives, you can add the opposite to become plus 1. So our answer in this case is positive 1. So these can be very tricky, so make sure you have the rules down for what happens with the negative sign. Next, we are going to write the following number using power of 10. So you have to break it down into the separate numbers. So first we have 10,000 plus 4,000 plus 500 plus 2. 10,000 can be written as 1 times 10 to the power of 4. Put that in brackets. 4,000 can be written as 4 times 10 to the 3. And the 3 comes from the amount of zeros following the 4. Also in brackets. Plus 5 times 10 to the 2. 10 to the 2 is 100, so we're saying 5 times 100. And lastly, 2 times 10 to the power of 0. 10 to the power of 0 is 1, so 2 times 1. And the next example, we are doing the opposite. We are writing the number in standard form. So 2 times 10 to the 5 is a 2 with 5 zeros behind it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plus 3 times 10 is 30. So my final answer is going to be 200,030. Great, let's start the lesson. Lesson 4, order of operations with powers. So in order to do this, we need to remember how to use BEDMAS. This should be very fresh on our minds because we just talked about it in our last unit. BEDMAS stands for brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. And remember, addition and subtraction and division and multiplication are done in order they appear. So you can think of them as a pair. They come and you do whichever one comes first. So the main thing that we're adding in is exponents. So example number 1 says evaluate the following expression. Evaluate is just a fancy way of saying find the answer in standard form. So in order to do this, we need to use BEDMAS. Here I have exponents and addition. So when I see BEDMAS, I say exponents comes first, and you're going to do them in the order they appear. So I'm going to do 3 to the power of 3 first. 3 to the power of 3 is, and you can write this on the side or write in the equation, 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And now I'm going to do 2 to the power of 3, which is 2 times 2 times 2. So we have 27 plus 8. 27 plus 8 is 35. Now remember, for all of these questions, you should be able to do them without a calculator. Make sure you use any strategy that you need to add, to subtract, or multiply, or divide. So exponents come before adding. Let's move on to our next example. Example 2, 3 minus 2 to the power of 3. So my first step in evaluating this is going to be evaluating 2 to the power of 3. 2 to the power of 3 is 2 times 2 times 2. All of those can be done at the same time. We get 3 minus 8. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Now 3 minus 8. You have $3 and you take away $8. You now have negative 5. Great, so let's move on to example 3. 3 plus 2 to the power of 3. So thinking back to BEDMAS, we have to evaluate inside the brackets first. 3 plus 2 is 5 to the power of 3. 5 to the power of 3 is 5 times 5 times 5. And now we can do 5 times 5 first, which is 25, and multiply that again by 5. If you're not sure what this is, you can do it using long multiplication. 25 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Plus 2 is 125. So my final answer is 125. Example number 4. Okay, we're getting a little bit more complicated now. We still have to remember BEDMAS. B-E-D-M-A-S. So we're going to do brackets first. We have 2 sets of brackets, but inside of the curvy set of brackets, we just have one number. So we can ignore that one. But remember, inside our brackets, we have to do BEDMAS as well. So that means that our first step is going to be negative 3 to the power of 3, the exponents inside our brackets. Everything else stays the same. Negative 3 to the power of 3. And if you want, you can do this on the side. Negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is equal to positive 9 times 3 So it's equal to negative 27. So now I can plug in negative 27 in here. Minus 6 all to the power of 2. All right, next I see I have multiplication and subtraction. My next step is going to be the multiplication. 2 times 27, or 2 times negative 27. Right away I know my answer is going to be negative because a positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 27 is 54. If you want to write it out and do it the long way, that's great. Minus 6 to the power of 2. All right, only step left I have inside my brackets is subtraction. Negative 54 minus 6 is negative 60 squared. So notice we have a square set of brackets. It doesn't change the fact that we're still squaring a number and that number is in brackets. So this is the same as saying negative 60 times negative 60. So right away, I know my answer is going to be positive because two negatives times each other give us a positive. So let's write out 60 times 60. So I know that if I take the 0 and multiply it by my numbers above, it's just going to give me 0. So when I move on to my next line, I have to add in a 0 because I'm now moving to the 10 spot. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 6 is 36. Add those together. 3,600 is my answer. All right, we're doing good. Let's move on to our next example. Example number 5. So sometimes it can be tricky to figure out what you have to do first. Make sure you remember BEDMAS, which means that we have to do brackets first. Inside the brackets, we have two sets of exponents and an addition. We have to do both of the exponents before we can do the addition. Now, with the exponents, you can do them at the same time. So 18 squared is 18 times 18. I'm going to figure that out on the side. 18 times 18. 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 6 is 14. Add in a 0, and at the time you add in a 0, the 6 disappears. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. Add those together. 4, 12, carry the 1, 324. So we now have 324 plus 5 to the power of 0. But remember, anything to the power of 0 is just 1. So 324 plus 1 to the power of 2 divided by negative 5 to the power of 3. So I'm still not quite finished inside my brackets. Let's go ahead and add that. We have 324 plus 1, which is 325, to the power of 2 divided by negative 5 to the power of 3. So both of those questions are both parts of this. There's a division and exponents. So let's do 325 times 325 first. So write it out the long way. 325 times 325. Five times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. Moving on to the 2 by putting a 0 placeholder in because we're moving on to the 10 spot. 2 times 5 And remember, as you do that, the numbers on the top disappear. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, now since we're moving on to the 100 spot, we have to put in 2 placeholders. And the numbers on top once again disappear. I'm gonna have to scroll down here. Three times 5 is 15. Carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 3 is 9. So it's really important that we know how to do this without using a calculator. Now we add these all together. 5, 2, 5 plus 5 plus 6 is 16. Carry the 1. We now have 7 plus 1 plus 1 plus 6. So that's 15 and 10. Oh, that's a big number. So we have 105,625. At the same time, we can do this one. -5 to the power of 3. We did this on a previous example. We saw that 5 times 5 is 25. And then 5 times another -5 is -125. So I have 2 numbers that I need to divide now left. I know my answer is going to be negative because we have a positive divided by a negative. And now I just have to do that long division. So let's create some space here. All right, so our long division, we have 105,625 divided by 125. So I know that 105 cannot divide by 125, so my first number that I'm actually going to be looking at is 1,056. So I can make groups of 125. I'll do that on the side here. 125 plus 125 is 250, and that's 2 groups. Let's double that to get to 4 groups. So add another 250. Gets us to 4 groups, and that is 500. We double that one more time. We'll get to 8 groups, and we'll be at 1,000. So 8 groups of 125 is 1,000. So the 8 goes up top, and now we subtract 1,000, and we're left with 56. We can now bring down the 2, and now we have 562. So we said that the 500 was 4 groups, so we have that going in 4 times. And we subtract 500, 625. So 500 was 4 groups, so 500 plus another 125 gets us to 625, which would be 5 groups. So it's 845, and we have no remainder. So my final answer is -845. Wow, lots of work without using a calculator. All right, let's try example 6. The following expression represents how much chlorine is present per 1 meter cubed of water in Lynn's swimming pool and hot tub. The suggested concentration of chlorine is 20 grams per meter cubed. What is the concentration of chlorine in Lynn's pool slash hot tub? So in order to do this, we just have to calculate what this is, but we have to use bed mass. So remember, for the long division, like the long line here that I'm outlining in green, we have to calculate the top and the bottom separately and then divide them. So our division is going to be our last step. So let's take a look at the top and the bottom separately. So the top is already done for us. It's just equal to 690. So we really just have to worry about the bottom. So the bottom, we have 2 times 4 squared plus pi times 1 to the power of 3. So we need to use bed mass, which says that we're going to do our exponents first. 2 times 4 squared, 4 squared is 16, 4 times 4, plus pi times 1 cubed is 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1. Next, we are going to do the multiplying. 2 times 16 is 32, plus pi times 1. Now we can do pi times 1. Remember, any number times itself is still itself. So it's 32 plus pi. Now at this point, we can estimate pi is 3.14. So we have 35.14. So now that we have the top and the bottom, we can find out the entire solution by taking 690 and dividing it by 35.14. This question you are welcome to use your calculator on. 690 divided by 35.14 is equal to 19.6 approximately. So going back to the question, it says the suggested concentration is 20 grams per meters cubed, while ours is 16.9 grams per meters cubed. So it's really close to the 20, which is good. All right, moving on. To example 7. Explain why 4 to the power of 3 plus 2 to the power of 3 and 4 plus 2 to the power of 3 are different. Show your work. I want you to try this one on your own. Make sure you're using bed mass, and I will show you the solution in a second, but right now, pause your video. All right, so when I calculate 4 to the power of 3 plus 2 to the power of 3, I get 72. And when I do bracket 4 plus 2 to the power of 3, I get 216. So the difference is when we follow bed mass, first we do exponents and then we add for the first one, but for the second one, we do inside the brackets first, then we do exponents. So brackets comes before exponents. You can pause this video if you need to write it down. Example 8. Identify my mistake in the following solution. Show me the correct solution. So if we were to solve this, the first thing we would have to do is exponents. 4 to the power of 2 is 16, so that step looks good. 2 to the power of 4 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 equals 16. So my first mistake is this 8. The 8 should be 16. So I'm going to start by writing out the correct solution on the side here. 16 plus 16. Okay, 5 squared is 25. That one's good. Times 25. And then lastly, we have negative 3 to the power of 2. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, so subtract 9. That part looks good. So the only mistake I see so far is the 8. Now I have to multiply 16 times 25. That's the next step in BEDMAS. 16 times 25 equals 400. So I have 16 plus 400 minus 9. 16 plus 400 minus 9. I can do those all at the same time to get 407. And that is the correct solution. All right, we will do example number 9. When I return, you can start on your assignment.